Yeah, we were live finally. Yay!
And we are live. I'm here with the jolly green Rusty the Giant next to me.
Wow.
Actually, now that you changed the screen, it's a little different. When you actually had us next to each other, like you were up close, it
was like,
looked like you were gonna like eat my head off.
Hey, five, oh, thumb. Yeah, I was like looking at that. It's like, oh yeah, I can change this thing. It's like I'm so frazzled right now.
Yeah, yep. So you had some technical difficulties.
Yeah, it's like my internet was working fine up until I clicked on you joined up, and all of a sudden my internet went. Bleh. I was like, what the heck just happened?
I zapped you from Canada.
Yeah, because I was watching a show not more than 10 minutes before I hopped over here on my computer, and it's like,
yeah.
And I was watching on the computer, so it's like, what the heck?
Move this forward here. So
it's like I'm back on the spaceship. I'm coming back to Earth. Can you hear me?
This is not the first time you've come to us from outer space.
And let's just say, and all the time I was sitting there frustrated. I already started my musty drink, and I've been imbibing for a while.
I hear you. I hear you. Scarnier says, blame Canada.
It's that damn snow.
Clark says, in the end, humans won the war against technology. How dare they try to hamper the conversation of tabletop topics? I agree.
Oh, I had to grab my coaster.
Yep.
From Des Moines, Iowa. Confluence Brewing. There we go. So what do you have for a musty drink tonight?
Oh, well, as I told you, I'm dealing with a little bit of a pre-root canal tooth. And because all of my scotch I keep and my whiskey I keep downstairs, it's usually a little chilled, like just naturally in my basement. And so I've been actually I poured mine out early too to try to just to get it to warm up, actually, just because I didn't want a tooth. And so I have got my Woodford Reserve. You know, my quite like that one. See if I can get a good look at it there. Woodford Reserve. You could tell I like it. So a little bourbon, actually, not scotch, but a little bourbon tonight. So that's what I've got.
A couple bottles. Yeah, I got a couple bottles of that sitting in the storeroom behind me.
Mm-hmm. Couple bottles.
Yeah, it was on sale. You know, it was like $25 a bottle instead of its usual $50. So I was like, percent off. I grab a couple, and I, imbibe every once in a while. It doesn't mean I have to blow through it. It's like tonight is McAllen's 12-year-old.
Nice. I've not had that one.
Is it good? This was the sherry cask one.
Oh, I like those.
Yeah, so it's got that little kind of a sweetness to it. Now, if I do run out of that bottle, I still got a bottle of 40 Creek sitting right in front of me.
Dan Boom is in the house, so we've got at least 3 people here. Hello, everyone, and hello, Dan. Dan, you missed all of the you missed all of the shenanigans. You know, Rusty had to come to us from the space station, orbiting from the little bit of an internet problem, so we're getting started a little late. But yeah.
Oh, I forgot to change my my thing. I'm no longer Punisher tonight. I am the Who.
So. There you go. Not Bob O'Reilly, but
yeah. I last Monday night I was at a concert, so I told you about it.
Yes.
I sent. Well, yeah, I did send you.
It's a different Who. It's a different Who. Yeah.
Yeah, the Mongolian Who.
That's right. So, what do you? I've been watching your videos. You've been productive recently. What have you been working on?
Well, I would show you, but it's all over at the other computer. It's all set up over there. So I moved everything over there which I'm now at my desk where I'm always working. I can just pick it up and show it to you, but I can't. So, whoa, need that to change my lighting a little bit here. There. So yeah, it's like I've been working on those Hessians. I was going to show that I got, the red, the facings and all that stuff on them. I got that all done. And now I'm pretty much going to start. I was working on the faces. So.
Now the red is sort of a minor color on that uniform, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of like the inside of the uniform, and when they, how they pin the back sides.
Right.
And then when they pin it back, then you see the red from the inside, and then it's the high collar up above that shows. Yeah. Then it's got white facings and buff facings on it. So.
Right. Yeah, I actually really like the color. Those are they're nice uniforms.
So yeah, I guess I could show you. I do have one. Right
there you go. Yeah.
So you can see.
Yeah, it's nice.
But if I had better light, you can see it. But
I don't want you to turn off. Don't push your system, man. Don't push it.
I don't want to break it. If it's broke, don't try to fix it.
Yeah, you don't want to kick that parrot or bird that's spinning the wheel under the desk.
I was feeding the hamsters, all that, the nuts and peanuts and stuff. They're like, come on,
faster.
I need more juice.
I can show you what I've got going here for my men or my stuff. I actually showed this on my video, but for those that haven't seen it, I finished my British regulars, and quite happy with these guys. And so I am actually now just on going to do artillery for the British next. And, I've got 2 cannons like this, but this is one of the ones I already have done. 6-pounder cannon. Actually show right there.
Dig my cannons out so I can at least have one Hessian crew cannon.
Yeah. And so I've puttied up with some epoxy sculpt my bases for my artillery and for the cannons. And so they're up next. For these guys, I actually just varnished them and put some grass down. And so these guys are done. I actually ended up putting my base bottoms, the flexi steel, it's basically, this will attach to a magnet. Even though it looks like a magnet, it has opposite polarity, and it'll attach to a magnet. And so I've done that too. So I can put these guys into the box that I have of the 30 some odd ones like these that they'll join. And and so quite pleased at that.
Those are 25 mil bases?
They are. Yeah.
Wow, your bases look. It's like I got 25s of mine, and they seem like they're small compared to yours.
Well, what you would find with these, I probably should just switch the camera again on these Mindens. For these Minden miniatures, what you would find in most cases from most figures with them is that their height is very comparable to Perry's and those size miniatures, but they're slimmer. Their proportions are less heroic, and so they do end up looking a bit small that way, for the most part. Now, some of yours also have higher hats, because you did grenadiers, right? Or grenadiers.
Yeah, grenadiers.
Yeah, and so your hats would go probably up to there in some cases, for that reason, and so would these if I had that style of uniform. But yeah, I use the 25 mil base, and these guys, their height is actually 28 millimeter when you measure them out. They're not tiny. They have an illusion a bit because they're more slim.
Okay.
So they're eating army rations. They're not.
Well, they're typical of the size of their generation, era. So
That's right.
Oh, well, now if they were grenadiers, they would all be huge.
That's true. The biggest dudes, right? Like they always got like the biggest guys.
Yeah, the
That's what I heard.
Are all the 6-footers. Like, all right, you're 6 foot, you're big and strapping lads. You can throw a grenade that doesn't go off in your hand, and
Exactly. But yeah, no, we'll see. You know, like when I'm gonna order, I have some AWI British Grenadiers that I was using for the longest times with the bearskin hats, but I'm gonna order some proper for French Indian War Grenadiers for both the French and the British, and we'll see how they look like next to them. It'd be interesting to see. I think I'll probably be doing those in my next order to Minden. I've already got an order out to Crantera for some of their Marines and some of their personality figures. But then after that, I'll probably do another big Minden order and do Grenadiers for both sides. Maybe even some Highlanders and stuff too.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, that'll be cool. So what do you think? I know that we're kind of coming in late on this. Maybe we should... should we get right on our topics? We're kind of rushing through our normal greetings a bit.
Yeah, we could do that since it's 9:30 now. So
yeah, exactly. So all right, I'll do the first topic I'll introduce the first one, I guess. So this first topic could be taken different ways, but we want to talk a little bit about video games and how do they ever really emulate tabletop games that they're intending to. And so the video game industry makes a lot of games that can mirror the tabletop gaming. In some cases, it's just taking a fictional universe like Warhammer 40K, and you may even be like a first person, shooter where you're literally walking around and you're a Terminator. And like, you could argue that that's not really trying to emulate tabletop gaming. That's making a first person shooter using the genre that's being ported from tabletop gaming. But sometimes tabletop games try to emulate, video games try to emulate a tabletop kind of thing. Warhammer Fantasy, I believe, has tried to do that. Like, it's arguable as to whether they weren't trying to exactly emulate tabletop. But another example, I think, or two of them that are similar would be Warhammer, not Kill Team, but the board game with the Terminators and the Tyranids.
Space Hulk.
Space Hulk, yeah, I'm drawing a blank. So Space Hulk has done video games that try to exactly emulate it. Also Battlefleet Gothic, I've not played it, but my understanding is they've made a game that's really tried to emulate the rules exactly like the tabletop, very close. And then even Mordheim has done a game that's turn-based that I would argue tries to emulate the tabletop game. In addition to that, I'll let you talk about it, in your thing, but I know BattleTech has done some stuff. There's likely military simulators and like other things that have happened. And so in the end, the question is not whether or not video games are going to replace tabletop, and I think we've kind of talked about that a bit. I mean, we see them as different hobbies and things, but really just more of a critique on how this is translated when people try to take the miniatures out, but get the experience like a miniatures game. So what do you think, Rusty?
Yeah, there's many different ways to, it's like the first one that you mentioned, the Warhammer Fantasy one. I played some of that in the past. It seems to work fairly close. It's not exactly like the game, the tabletop game, but I think they got enough of it down that it kind of gives you the feel of the tabletop game. And I think it's kind of close enough to be a gateway drug into the fantasy game itself when they had a fantasy game. And so I think that's one of the first ones that you've seen in that was fairly big system that was related to. Now, if you look at a lot of the World War II games, there's a few out there that are kind of represent playing you're tactically, you feel like you're playing a squad or your company, and you're going out there and you have to move here, move there, type of thing. Setting up is like Crosses Irons, I think, is one of them. There's a whole bunch of them out there that kind of simulate. I think the historical ones are pretty common. Now, there has been some transition of like board games becoming computer games. I've done a lot of those where you feel like you're playing the board game,
right.
And they almost seem like one for one. There's a few of them out there. It's like one is like the Fall of, or the Third Reich is one of them we used to play a lot of that seemed like it. Now, the most recent one I probably spent pretty close to 600 hours, 650, almost 700 hours playing is the Battletech one. We've talked about that one. Mel, who's Striker, he used to stream that all the time, playing that game. And it's not quite the board game or the tabletop game version, because there's some differences in how they set it up in the mechanics, but it does feel like you're playing Battletech. Because
so they do a good job.
Yeah, they do a good job. It's like you feel like you're shooting air, just like you played Battletech. If you roll a dice and you hit different areas and locations, it's pretty similar. They just have a few mechanics, so it's like taking the aspects of Solaris rules and they made it into the video game too. So, and if you strictly go look at it from, if you ever played, you probably haven't ever played the Solaris rules, like at a lot of the conventions, they kind of a role playing in some ways too. So you do have some of the aspects of it. And it does keeps me going all the time, where I feel like I play it probably once or twice a week now. There's times like over the holidays during when I wasn't playing World of Warships. Yes, I play that. And so it was kind of like in between playing World of Warships and playing Battletech over the holidays, because I did, with the family and everything around, I just couldn't get into, painting or anything. So I just like, I'm going to take some time off from painting, and when I can, and play some of that video game. So that's kind of like some of the things that I came across. And I do feel it's like they had, for a while, I can't remember the name of the game system. It suddenly popped out of my head and all this hassle tonight. It was, if you've seen anything about it, where they had the miniatures had like little chips or something in them.
Oh, and Skylanders? No, that's for my kids.
Yeah.
That's where you put the guy on there and he appears on the screen. They have a game where there's miniatures that with chips, like actual miniatures, like a miniature game.
Yeah, it's like a miniature game. And you have everything goes around, and it's like all the action and stuff is computerized. So you can control stuff, and it does everything for you, basically.
But it's not a kid's game, right?
Not really, no.
Okay, because my kids played with that technology. It sounds like the same thing.
It's
my
really
kids loved it. But yeah.
It didn't last very long because I don't think there was enough people at the time. The technology was just taking off. So it's like, hey, this new stuff's happening, and they're trying. I think they were trying to implement it, and hopefully that was something that would take off. But it was one of those things where he's like, oh, okay, fine. But it just didn't. I just trying to remember what the name of it was, because I seen it at Gen Con.
What's your gut instinct, though, on the basic question of whether, like, you kind of have talked about each one and how the ones you've played and how well you think it is or how you liked it, but if you had to say, does a computer game ever really that attempts to trying to simulate tabletop, does it ever do it? And also they have these emulators out there too, where people go in and they play against each other, actual tabletop games where it's truly, I don't know if it's called an emulator, but it's basically there's a name for it where you can play like 40K on the computer against people. I don't know if you're there's a name for that. I don't know if somebody in the somebody that's in the lobby chatting knows what I'm talking about. They put it up. Vassal, that's what it's called. Vassal. You ever hear of that? And basically, you can actually make tabletop games on Vassal and play against people. And it's two-dimensional, right? Like it's not trying to make it all graphically complex. It's actually quite simple graphically, and that might make it more possible. And I would actually throw that in there a little bit. I think it's part of the discussion, because if Vassal can do it, then it is kind of a game.
Now, I was talking with my one brother. He plays, my family plays a lot of D&D, and he was telling me about it's for D&D where you can go online and play D&D, and it's like a video game, but you're role playing, and you move your characters around and everything. You see the monsters, so like you're looking at a tabletop game, but you're role playing over top of it.
Right. I think I've heard of that. I think I've seen, when I was researching battle system, like the battle system for AD&D. Something came up on YouTube called where people were doing that when I was researching and trying to find videos on the battle system miniature game. I saw some stuff like you're talking about. It's interesting. It always comes down to what are they trying to achieve. And when you say, is it replacing the game or trying to emulate it well? Like, I would say Mordheim, I enjoyed when playing it. There were aspects to it I really liked, because I found that it was very cool how the combat, like you literally saw the rules pop up on the bottom of the screen that you would see in Mordheim, and how the attacks were happening. And like if there's, let's say, in Mordheim, you can outnumber. And so outnumber is a rule in Mordheim. And when you outnumber the opponent, they get a negative, or, like in the combat experience. And it literally will pop up saying outnumber. Like if your rat ogre fails a stupidity check, it'll literally say, failed. It'll either show the die, like the number that it got, but it's like failed stupidity check. And then like the rat ogre is stupid that round, like on the game. And it's basically following like the tabletop. And I really enjoyed it for that reason, that I was not playing Mordheim. I wanted to kind of try it out. And like, this looked like a cool turn-based experience, which for me, if it's going to try to really emulate tabletop, it should be turn-based to some degree. Like I'm thinking, like to get that experience of waiting and making like thinking about your strategy, it should have that element rather than, running around and having no interruption. However, the one criticism I would have, and it might be because I haven't actually played it that much, I found that there was a lot going on in the background. Like there was all kinds of people moving around I couldn't see. So even though there was an overhead grid where you could see the map and you could flash to it, I found that you were in this live action piece so much, I lost a good global perspective of where everybody was when I was playing the game. It wasn't as easy as in a miniature game to just look down and know where everybody is on the table.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I've got my guys on different parts of the board, and that might have been me being not a very experienced gamer, just not leveraging all the tools that I had available to me in the game. But I did find that it wasn't the same, like that feeling. I couldn't just easily, as a new person playing it, navigate where everything was on the board very easily. And so there was a negative there. I mean, like it tried to achieve it. I think it did some things that were really quite awesome, in trying to achieve that. I have a buddy that played the not Space Hulk, the Battlefleet Gothic on the iPad, I believe it was. And my understanding is it tried to essentially achieve the same thing that you try to achieve with Battlefleet Gothic. Like it used all the rules, and he loved it. Like he actually thought it was excellent, and did a really good job at emulating like Space Fleet Battle, and doing very much like the game. And so that style, which you could argue, I mean, I never played Battlefleet Gothic. I don't know, would it be more of a board game, or is it full-fledged tabletop game? Like, what would you say?
The video game portion of it?
No, the actual game.
The board game. Yeah, I played that. Where I used to have some Battlefleet Gothic stuff before I sold it all, but it wasn't a bad system. But it's tabletop. Would you call it a tabletop, or would you call it a board game? It's tabletop.
So if it's tabletop, he says that they did a really good job at it. Maybe to some degree, because it's space battles. You have less miniatures on the table, and like you can kind of really isolate the rules in the game and the graphics and everything a lot easier than, you know, something where you have like each unit has 20 independent guys running around.
It's basically Battlefleet Gothic was almost like a skirmish in space, you know. That go if you look at it that way, you know, you weren't looking at grand space battles,
right?
You know, you might have 3, 4, or 5 frigates out there, a couple of cruisers, 3, 4 cruisers, and maybe a battleship or something. That's typical,
right?
How I would look at the game, and that really isn't you know, it's like me. I would think a grand battle would have maybe 18 battleships with, you know, 30 cruisers and 50 or 60 destroyers floating around out, frigates, you know, throwing lead everywhere.
Scarnier made a comment below. Says that it was a direct digital conversion, Battlefleet Gothic, of the original game, and its turn-based format. PC version is not turn-based and has slightly different mechanics. So maybe that's the reason why on the iPad it just seems very much the game. Space Hulk I would call a board game, and I played the video game on the PC Steam of Space Hulk, and I actually thought it did a really good job of emulating the experience of Space Hulk, the board game. Like they basically tried to do exactly the same thing. Having said that, I wasn't right in the very beginning when they took out all the bugs, but I did have a bit of a bug associated with it where I was like on like scenario 8, like pretty far into it. And you had to do something where you had to like unlock a door, like, you know, out of the Hulk, like to get to somewhere else. And like, so the mission was getting there and getting all your guys there and then unlocking the door. I couldn't get the freaking door unlocked. Like I had to basically stop playing the game and never going on because of like a computer thing. So the game itself was great, but because of those kinds of things you run into in video games. Yeah. I mean, if it was the actual like board game, I could have just grabbed the door and pulled it off and just moved them through, you know, but with this, I'm sitting here clicking, right click, left click. How do I get this freaking door open? I did everything I'm supposed to do. And so that's the
kind of put my fist through the screen. You know?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you run into with video games sometimes, like these illogical problems, you know.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You know, it's like we're starting to see more and more of this interaction ability, where you could have somebody where, you know, they start designing the miniatures with that. Like I said, they have the chips in them, and you could have the grid laid out, like a holographic grid in your location, and someone can be across the country or on the other side of the world. They have the same. You're playing a video game where it's like you have the same pieces, and it's just video, like, or it's a holographic game basically.
Yeah.
Where you just click, it's there, I'm moving my guy over here, and it's like, and you see the pieces popping up everywhere on yours, so you see them move on your location, but it's a holographic or actual physical type of representation.
And you know what happens? Chewbacca plays tabletop. He doesn't like that, so he smashes the table.
Yeah. It's like I just shared on my Facebook page. It was a couple days ago. It shows Harrison Ford sitting there all scruffy, and he's got a dog sitting next to him. And he said, after all the mushrooms wear off, you realize that you're not a space smuggler with your Wookiee. So
Dan had said something a little while ago. He said that he'd used Vassal and it worked well for board games. That is something, you know, I would call it a type of video game because it's on a screen. You know, I mean, it is using your computer. I think it's meant to be really basic. It's not meant to really impress in that way. But, you know, Infinity has something like that too. Infinity has a system where, and they actually do have like the miniatures, like where you can see the miniatures on the screen and stuff, I believe. And it may be even be on Vassal. Maybe they've improved it because I've seen people playing that, and they'll play that online. That's a really good thing. If you're a tabletop gamer and you just don't have the ability to play easily with folks like they get together, if you want to keep sharp, if like on a system, if you really like a particular system, being able to play somebody from across the country on a thing like Vassal, I think is not a bad thing. I mean, it's not to take away from the experience. Dan said something earlier, which I totally agree with. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy tabletop gaming. And he said, I'm going to paraphrase his comment, but he said that there are a lot of things from the tabletop hobby that he doesn't get from video games, and it's why he doesn't play video games and he plays tabletop. And that is like touch and the feel of the miniatures. And he mentioned a number of things here. Yeah, he says the handling the miniatures and the terrain, the player interaction, and the painting. I agree on all of those, although I would say that player interaction, you can actually do quite a lot with video games these days. Like if you're actually into playing group games, like people are all talking to each other, it's quite fun. I played Space Marine for years on PlayStation 3. And I was even in like the Blood Angels chapter on the PlayStation 3. Some of those guys are still on my Facebook. Actually, I still talk to them, and we would all, get together and we play against other chapters, and it was a lot of fun. But I would actually totally agree with that, and I don't know if it's the appropriate thing to call it, but some people will call this analog gaming. What we do, like versus digital, like they'll call it analog in a general sense, and the tactile part of our hobby of making a hill, like truly making a hill and having your guy on the hill and like painting him, and just the physical aspect of it is kind of I'm not going to call it retro because people can just do it now that never did it before and enjoy it just as much. But it is still an old hobby that requires a lot of different skills, like from an artistic and, in the case of wargaming, like there's strategy and like there's just understanding rule systems, and there's just so many different components that make up this hobby that I like and that you don't find in the video gaming hobby. That I totally agree with that comment. It wasn't really kind of what the main thing I really was focusing on for the topic tonight was just the idea of whether they can emulate it in the sense of the experience in some way, like you can play it and you get a feeling like of a turn-based like tabletop game, that has some overview and aspect of it. But I understand his point that if you're saying, does it emulate it, but I'm not touching miniatures and moving miniatures around the table, then the answer is no for some people. And I think maybe that's what Dan's trying to say.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if they can ever get the computer aspect of it down to, like I said earlier, where you feel like you're actually at the table with somebody, and then if you have like where the holographic ability where if you put the goggles on and you got the hand things where you actually feel like you're at the table with somebody and they pop up, their avatars there, and it's like you're talking to them and everything, but they're that type of thing. I could, say that would be something that would be in the future if they can get that down.
Yeah.
But at the moment, there is something to be said about being across the table. When something happens, you can throw the dice at them and let them know you just pleasure with them or something.
Yeah.
Which you can't do when you're playing a video game.
I just had this image, and I got to say, it's kind of making me laugh because with what you're talking about, everybody puts these things on their heads, and then like the whole world around them is like Tron, like like all the buildings come up, and like I'm looking at you, but I see you, and it's like whoever you want me to see, your avatar.
Yeah.
And then the highlight of that moment, the moment that the world around us becomes digitized and everything's, and then I'm looking at you, and you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger because that's what you want to look like, and then we then both bend down and look at a holographic image of all these little miniatures on a table. That's like, that would be hilarious because in all honesty, it's a bit of an ironic thing. I mean, like at the end of the day, like our hobby started because of trying to simulate reality, like, in a certain way. Right. And
going in, making our hobby into reality around us So we're checking out completely. And then you realize is that when you're sitting there and they're playing the game and they're sitting there in their underwear and they're like scratching themselves or something all the time. And there's like smoking a cigar and it's like, they look like they're drinking their scotch or something there. And it's like, and you realize, oh my God.
Well, and the other point is you're going to create this extremely complex virtual world that people are trying to do to emulate reality, to make things look as realistic as possible, to then be able to look down and at a little table in that virtual reality of these fixed figurines.
they're moving. So when you move them and it's like you're playing fantasy and you're watching your guy go out there and they're chopping away, you know. So and they're ripping. It's like the rat ogre runs in there and rips the guy's head off and eats it. You know, it's like the thing.
So Scornier says it already exists, gents. It's called virtual reality gaming, and I realize they have the goggles still, and like even PS4 that they have that. I don't own it, and so it's definitely foreign to me. But I can't imagine that they're really focusing that technology on the miniature gaming hobby, like to translate that, because to me, even as someone that appreciates this hobby, that seems like a backward step. You know, like for them, how many tabletop gamers are going to actually get into virtual reality to play tabletop gaming in virtual reality? It just seems to me like a joke. I mean, like almost like it.
Yeah.
Like
for
like
us,
that.
It is.
Well, and it would be a joke to go to all that trouble to then play tabletop gaming in it. Like it just, I don't know. It just seems kind of funny to me.
Yeah, for us, it's we do it because it is part of our makeup. You know, I'd say we're analog. Like you said, you brought up, this is an analog world that we're in, and everything we do is analog because I still like touching the books and stuff like that. And you have people around you that are doing everything on their phones, and it's like, well, just put it on your phone. What's the big deal? Because I don't want to stare at a phone all the time.
Yeah.
Or I want to it's like, I don't want to stare at a laptop or my computer and all that stuff, because I like to physically touch something and move it around. And that's the same way when you're playing a game. Is like, I like to feel my miniatures and move them around and physically roll the dice. You know, it's like, it's just something that's part of the game. That's the way we're raised. Now, on the other hand, you get people that are raised in nothing but 100% video games since they've been young kids. It's like, that's what they expect. They don't like, a lot of them don't like to have to, well, I got to paint all this stuff? Why can't I just buy it and it comes up on the computer or my virtual reality already painted for me?
Yeah.
Like,
no, and I like, sorry, you cut out there. I didn't hear that last part. I'm not sure if everybody else did, but I didn't hear what you said in the end there, Rusty.
Well, it feels like, you know, when you're checking out type of, you know, you're checking out a reality when you're doing everything digitally.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of like how I look at it. You know, there's certain aspects. It's like, we do this thing because we said, how many hours do we spend painting so we can spend 2 hours playing a game?
Yeah. Well, and this is, Scarnier said something, and I agree and disagree with him. He says it's a backward step for those who can get a game in real life, but for those who have no one to game with in a local area, it might be their only chance to play a game. I agree with that in the vassal sort of experience. Like, I think there's value in being able to play against folks from the other side of the world, even if you can get a game. But I wanted to play a game with you, Rusty. Like, I just wanted to have a drink and play some game that we both like, but we can't play a game. So, hey, let's just let's throw on the headphones and have a beer and just play the stupid thing on the screen and just have some fun. You know, like, that could be good. I could get that. And to some degree, Vassal, if it is as simple as we've been talking about, it might make sense for that. The joke for me that I was referring to, or the backward step, is maybe I should take the miniatures piece out for a second. What if it was tic-tac-toe? So if you and I go out and buy a PS4 and put on the virtual reality, and then we create a room that looks like our house, and then I see you, but the digital version of you exactly, and you see me, and then what do? We look down and we play tic-tac-toe, and all we see is a tic-tac-toe screen. And then we play tic-tac-toe. It's sort of like,
yeah,
you know, why are we doing
why are we wasting our time?
Right, like, what did they make all this for? Like that's kind of what I mean.
Spent thousands of dollars so we could play tic-tac.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to diminish miniature games as being as simple or, you know, whatever. What I'm saying is these folks want to run through a door and punch somebody in the face, or like fly a plane, or like, you know, like they're wanting to do things that challenge the system, you know, and that actually challenge the graphics and the engine. That's all my point of a backward step. I agree with Scarnier. There's a value actually in actually being able to play against other folks at a distance, and just, or even if you can't get a game.
If you can get a game locally, there's that face-to-face interaction, which some of us really like doing. We crave doing that as much as possible. But let's say if you can't get a game in, and your local group refuses to play for a month or two, it's like, you know, that's something that can scratch your itch.
Yeah,
that you really need scratched. And I like what Dan said here. It's like the smell of the new rule book. Yep, you crack that open and you smell that new paper, ink in there. Yeah, I like that.
Absolutely. It's like new car smell. Lower, you know, reduces your life, but you at least get to smell that new car. You freeze on me there, or are you just reading?
No, I'm just reading.
Okay.
It's like,
I thought maybe
like we are. It's like, this is a good example right here. We are the 3D world, and then when we have to go create a 3D world to live in take our 3D part of us to go live in a 3D world.
Yeah,
it's kind of like called checking out of reality.
Yeah,
in a certain way about it.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. My sort of final thoughts on it too is I think we covered a lot of things, and I think in a lot of ways I didn't intend for this to become a virtual reality discussion, but I think it's very interesting that it did.
But I think it is because
that's where it's going.
Where it's going.
Yeah,
it's like I can already see where this can go. Because I was like, all right, we have the tabletop games, and we're already buying the miniatures. I can't see anything different that's going to happen. Is that you buy the 3D miniatures? You know, it's like they're already painted for you. It's like you're just buying them, so now you can plug them in like a It's like you got your DLC, you know, your downloadable content. Can't even say it. Content. There you go. Get that out. You put your content out, and it's like, oh, it's already loaded up. Pop it up, and there it is. And that's where it's going. I can see that in 15, 20 years. That's going to be probably a lot of reality to that. Yeah. You know, one of my closing thoughts, like, I don't know how much more time we'll spend on the topic, but one of my closing thoughts on it, like the two things that I was thinking, and they kind of blend together. For me, it always falls short to some degree, like when you do the video games, and there's more than one way I would think about it. On a more obvious level for me, it falls short in the current state of video games versus what I get for the tabletop hobby, you know, whether that be how they emulate the rules, whether they be how they do the presentation, whether it be, you know, the very idea of not being able to touch the miniatures. Like, there's always something that's falling short. So what you're doing is you're doing without, so you can do, because you can't get a game or you want to play somebody from somewhere else. But it also falls short in other ways, and that's the imagination. A big piece, I was trying to think about what it is that I sort of enjoy about my experience. And some of it, the first thought that came to my mind is the quiet. Like, when I have a game, whether it be solo or I'm playing with a friend and I'm setting up, you put all the miniatures on the table and you kind of control this and you do the things that you want to do. And you're relaxed. You know, you can do things at your own pace. You can kind of think about what you want to do and like analyze it. And that's kind of what I expect from it. And most video games aren't designed for that kind of experience. Like, most of them, there's a lot of input, right? It's everything's about input and constant and requiring things from you and timing. But then there's more to it than that. It's not just the relaxation. It's that you can argue that
there's a lot less to a miniatures game in the presentation, in that it's a fixed miniature. And so it's not this guy moving around. You can't change the colors at your will on the uniform and all this stuff. And you can argue that the miniature game is lacking in a number of things if you come from a video gamer focus. But you can also argue as a miniature gamer that because you're relying on the video game for all of your experience, you're limited, as Dan said before, you're the passenger. You're limited to the experience of the people that make the game. But with the miniature game, you're really relying much more on your imagination, and the imagination's limitless. And so when you actually are engaging your imagination with this, you can argue that it can meet and even exceed what you're physically being stimulated by in a video game in certain ways.
Yep.
Now, is that waxing philosophical or what?
Waxing lyrical? Yeah,
go.
It's like what Dan says here. It's like when I play, I literally see all my miniatures running around. Yeah, that's as good as they get. Your imagination is better than any computer game.
Yeah, that's right. And then he just said it right there. Yeah, I think he put,
it's like excellent.
Yeah,
because when you paint your miniatures, you're putting your imagination in, trying to get your twist on the game. It's like you're looking at Dan's Brettonian sitting there in his little picture right there, and that's a great example. It's like he put his own spin on it. He created his own knights, painted them up the way you wanted them, and about the only way you could with a video game. Like you said, in the future you might be able to go in and like, I want this color here, I want that color. Then you change things. You can physically change it how you want. But, it's still not the same as you putting the time in it and with a paintbrush and putting your heart and soul on, like it's a canvas. You become an artist when you're putting the paint on how good of an artist you may be. That's debatable from one way to the other. Each person has their own skills or lack of skills, but you're putting something into it.
Yeah.
As part of you is going on to it. So.
And at a very basic level, like, when you have like your grass mat, like on the table that you put your miniature on, it's like feeling the miniature. Like you can feel, like some people like the old grass mats better than, like, let's say a mouse pad. I mean, there's ways to argue for or against, but one thing for sure is the grass mat feels like grass. Like I have that old GW mat, and they're wonderful. And you move your miniature across it, it's like it's moving across grass.
Whenever we play over at our local game shop, it's like I'll go hunt down their grass mats because they have a whole bunch of them, and I use those. And we got guys that will just they'll pull out the neoprene mat and just roll it out, and there it is. And I'm sitting there trying to finagle it and tighten the other one up. But I like like you said, I like the tactile feel of like running your, it's like as that great Christmas movie Die Hard, where he's got John McClane sitting with his shoes off. How he ends up without his shoes, he's sitting there feeling the carpet. It's like, oh yeah, it's like there is something you said about that. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's just one example, right?
Yeah.
Well, lots of, considering this is a miniature wargamer thing, and a lot of people don't like the video games that are on here, that we'd still have a lot of comments on this.
Yeah.
And so I think it's been an engaging topic.
Well, I think it is in a certain way, because you're always going to have some people who are going to connect with it more than we are. Because I like the Battletech video game that, it's kind of feels like I'm playing on a tabletop, but it still is not the same, because I'm always yearning. It's like, when are we going to play Battletech again? When are we going to play Battletech again? Because I'd rather sit at the table and throw the dice around and maneuver the guys around. It's one thing to just like, yeah, I'm playing the video game. Click, 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 but it's still not the same. So
yeah.
It's missing something.
True. It's true. And everybody thinks when they roll the dice, that it actually will be different than when you hit the button on the computer and it randomly does it. Like I might have not got that, but if I rolled the dice, I might have had a chance.
Yeah, I would have rolled those box cars and hit him right in the head. With that 18-20. That would have been it. That would have been done dinner. So
I think what everybody here is saying, including us, is thumbs down to video games. No, I'm just kidding.
Like,
no, I actually think
Scarnier
seems like he's a little bit of a gamer. He might actually play a little bit of games. I'm not sure. He can say whether that's true or not. I don't know. I know a lot of folks that on the channel that actually on my channel, like a lot of folks that play video games. So I know there are folks that like both. So
yeah, it's like Todd has said. It's like I think that 3D VR concept is cool, just not our thing. It's not quite our thing because we're kind of old school. And then, we are preaching to the choir.
We're rallying the masses.
Hot, hey! That's who go out there in charge. Yeah,
Scardy says he's playing a game right now. That's good.
Yeah, it's like, you can do that. That's one thing. It's like, you can be playing the video game while you are. It's like you are playing a game. So there we go. It's more of I guess the video game is more moving into being a board game than it is actually a tabletop game. That's the way I look at it.
That's right. All right. Well, what do you think? I think we've exhausted this topic. I think we've all come to the same conclusion for the most part. What is our next topic there, Rusty?
Well, since we've been talking a lot about miniatures, and we all have massive miniature collections, because we all been going at it for a long time, one way or the other. And you're pulling out something.
Actually, don't worry about me. Keep going. Sorry.
It was like, I've gone through. I need more something to drink here. It's like, okay. Since we all have a large collection of miniatures, it's do we have miniature crossover? Can we use our miniatures for different systems? And I think
not if you're a true fan. Not if you're a true fan.
That is true. But some of us are not GW fanboys all the time. So, what do you think? Do we have the ability to take our miniatures and cross them over to different systems, or do we have to just buy totally new miniatures? Because that's what the company says we have to do.
Right. Well, my off-the-cuff answer is that you always can, even when everybody says you can't. And, and can is a very loose word in that nobody's telling you what to do, like when you're at your house or with your friends. I mean, like you can do whatever the hell you want. If you're going to an official tournament and it's a proprietary system, you might not be able to. Like, I wouldn't want to go to I'm going to just say Warlord Games instead. I wouldn't want to go to a certain, maybe Warlord Games. I wouldn't want to go to a Warlord Games tournament for Gates of Antares and bring Games Workshop stuff, like, to try to say like my Space Marines or GAR or like with this other kind of faction. Like I wouldn't do that. To me, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, and they probably wouldn't let me anyway. But for the most part, I mean, I've used my GW Rogue Trader miniatures for generic skirmish, sci-fi skirmish rule sets. And it's using GW miniatures, but I'm using them for something else. Like a Space Marine is being represented by a different set of rules to represent a Space Marine. It's a armored tactical infantry kind of guy, or whatever. I'm just using something else to use my old miniatures. Historical's a no-brainer because it's almost designed, to be able to use different miniatures in most cases. I mean, there's definitely games that seem to be a bit more proprietary. Like I think Flames of War do a really good job of making people tend to buy the Flames of War stuff. And I don't know exactly why that is. Like because I don't play Flames of War, but there's certain ones that I get the sense of that people tend to buy the stuff for that game. But overall, when you're playing historical, usually there's like a gazillion options for miniatures across several scales, and you can do whatever you want with that. Now with Musket and Tomahawks, I definitely, get to use whatever I want. I mean, I've used Warlord Game stuff originally. I'm using Minden Crantera miniatures now. Those are like miniatures I like, but I could use whatever I want, and it's great for that reason. There's a lot of creativity. But even in, science fiction and fantasy games, that's becoming more the norm. I mean, whether it be something fan-based like Ninth Age, you can use whatever miniatures you want. But there's just, even like when Kings of War first came out, they let people use, they encourage people to use their GW stuff originally. I mean, I know they make their own miniatures, but you can use GW stuff, I believe, in most groups that I heard. So I think the answer is yes, but then the big question is, when do you not want to? And I think when you don't want to is when somebody's put a lot of effort into a game and you want to support them to be around as a company. And, it only makes sense in that scenario. Like if I haven't dipped into Marvel Crisis Protocol yet, but if I do, I'll definitely be buying and using their miniatures. I won't get the rules and just use my Marvel miniatures I have sitting right there. That I already have a lot of Marvel miniatures. I'll likely buy their miniatures and do it just because it's supporting them to be able to do more with the game. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a kind of an open-ended kind of thing, is that when you look at historicals, if you're using the same scale, because like I got these Hessians here, my Hessians could technically be used in sort of the, it's like they're American War of Independence, but they're the same Hessian type of troops that were used in the in Europe during it was like we had the French and Indian War, but it was the 7 Years' War, I think was it called. So they're basically the same troops. So they're crossover. They can be used either or. I could possibly even use them in Napoleonics for some of the German, Hessian, Prussian type forces, or Austrians, or even though a lot of them are changed their uniforms by that time. But if I was in a pinch and I just wanted to play, let's say, black powder in Napoleonics, and I don't have anything at the moment yet, it's like, oh, just bring those and use those. Use them as a facsimile, that type of thing. If you're two guys playing. But like you said, if you're playing at a tournament setting, if you're playing, it's like Games Workshop is notorious for this. Is like, you can't go into Warhammer World and play on their tables at Warhammer World with anything but Games Workshop stuff or Forge World. They said, no, you can't bring anything else in. Even though there's some guys that have had problems in the past where they bring the old stuff, it's like, if I brought my Ultramarine army and they look at that, it's like, well, obviously we know they're Space Marines, but where'd these things come from? I think he's like, yeah, they're all Rogue Trader. Yeah. But if I had that happen one time, was like I was over at our actual Games Workshop store, and the guy was looking at those because we were playing a game over there with one of the guys that I know, and he's like, "What are these things? Are those games?" It's like, yeah, they're all Games Workshop stuff. And he's like, I don't never seen any of this. That's like, because it's like they're older than you.
I remember you telling me that. That was the demon.
Yeah, and he was like looking at this stuff, and he's like, yeah, they're older than you. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you have a company that has their own miniature line, I can see buying their miniatures for their game. But until you have the money, it's like, all right, I got a whole bunch of Games Workshop miniatures, say all the 40K stuff, and I want to play the what's the Warlord Games one, their science fiction one,
Gates of Venturas.
Yeah, Gates of. It's like, I want to play that, but I don't have any of the miniatures yet. Well, we got the rules. Let's just sit down and figure out the rules. We got the miniatures, some miniatures to play proxy until we get the other stuff. I don't have a problem with that, because many times it's like I got friends of mine that don't want to spend any more money on any type of miniatures at all. They got plenty of miniatures, or just, well, we're going to use this as a proxy. This is a proxy. That go across the line type of deal.
Yeah.
And it's like Dan says, rules are cheap, miniatures and time are harder to come by. That's exactly the thing. It's like we can spend $20, $30 and buy a set of rules, but to go ahead, it's like, all right, to play this game system, we're going to buy the $30 rules and $300 in miniatures of that company, and then they figure out if we want to play it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, do you really want? I've kind of fallen into that trap a few times with some other systems where I bought the game. It's like Drop Zone Commander. I bought some miniatures with it, and I'm still trying to get rid of some of them. It's like no one wants to buy the darn things on eBay. They've been up for a year. It's like I bought into the system, and then no one wanted to play it. So it's like, okay,
I think it's a bit of a horse and cart sort of issue, because sometimes we buy the game because we really like the miniatures, and even if we just in the end paint up the miniatures and really enjoy that and collect them and like them, like for me with Marvel miniatures, it's kind of like that. Like I never really regretted buying the miniatures from the Night Models game, even though in the end the company tanked and it wasn't sustainable. I love those miniatures, and I had so much fun painting them, and I'll always like them, and so it's not really a loss to me. And so in some ways, you know, even when I get the experience of getting excited about it and painting up the miniatures and enjoying that, depends on what it is. Like in some cases, that's enough for me in the end. Like if it never doesn't turn out to be the best game ever and make the trifecta ultimate experience of having everything, then, you know, very few games do that in the end. You know, like I have very few core games compared to the amount of games I try and see. You know, it's funny about the rules with using miniatures for certain games, like with the tournaments, like the GW tournaments and things like that. If you think about it, there's certain times where the lines really blur. Like if it's a historical game, you could use like quite a few miniatures for the same game, and like the lines are really blurred. But what about something like Star Wars? If they had to make a rule in a Star Wars X-Wing tournament that you have to use their miniatures, you can't use another one, that would be for 0.2% of the population, because everybody pretty much knows that when you're going to play that game, you're going to want to use the miniatures, you know, or any sort of Star Wars based game, or like any strong brand name like that. You're going to feel like 99.8% of the people are going to feel really weird about bringing alternative miniatures to like a Marvel or a Star Wars tournament. You know, the ones that are going to do it are the 0.2% of the population that are truly clueless, like that are going to bring like a stand that says Batman on it, you know, with a piece of paper.
And actually a bat that says man on it.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. That's right. That's what that rule is for. It's for those people. It's where the lines become blur a bit, like where you get into games where there are some decent alternative miniatures, or where it's quite prolific to have, you know, 15 millimeter tanks, you know, or something like that. Then it could be a bit dicier as far as whether people could feel pretty justified as to bring those other ones.
Well, it's like I just put up the video that went up last night, you know, of my 15 millimeter German army. Mm-hmm. And I have Command Decision, I have Battlefront, I have Plastic Soldier Company, and Zvezda miniatures all in one army. Mm-hmm. Because when I first started playing 15 mil, all there was basically Command Decision. There might have been a couple other things out there that I'm not really remembering, but that was the main ones that I remember seeing out on the market at the time. Mm-hmm. And that's what I picked up, because they come in packets of 3 and our store carried them. And so that was what I did. I was like, you know, purchased those. And then along came the Battlefront, you know, Flames of War. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's like, hey, I can start adding more stuff, because no longer could get the less I ordered online, because at the time there really wasn't spent too much time on eBay, even though it was there. It wasn't like it was now, you know, where you got all the stores on there. You know, before, when eBay used to be just like, it was just an auction house. You know, you had to wait to see if something would pop up every once in a while, right, and buy it. And now it's like everybody has a store online, so you can just go and it's like, and shop online there if you want to. So, so when our local shops started carrying Flames of War, it's like, oh, now I'm started buying the Battlefront miniatures to go with those. So that was kind of like the transition, and Plastic Soldier Company came along, and I was like, oh, cool, these are And then Zvezda came along, and it's like, oh, cool. They've got really cheap miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
So you start just filling in the gaps with different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it, let's say, went to a Flames of War tournament, would they say I had to have only Battlefront miniatures? But it's kind of hard to tell because some of them look, side by side. It's like, even though the Battlefront miniatures are slightly larger size, they're more like 18 mil versus 15 mil type of thing. So,
in some cases, it really doesn't make much of a difference, right?
No, it doesn't. It's like it's the same vehicle. It's just who makes it is different.
Right.
Now, like here we got Dan said Kings of War seem to be heading down the road of GW, and I think before long they will require you to use only Manic miniatures because they're starting to expand out and create different lines that are better. Kind of the same thing that Games Workshop is doing, where they want you to buy your miniatures. It's like they want the money from you. It's like they get you hooked in on the plastic crack, and they want to be they're the only dealer in town type of stuff.
In some ways, it's kind of nice having a lot of different options. I mean, I don't really hate the companies that want to make a game that has like their own miniatures where they kind of are hoping that you're going to buy those. Like, all right, I'll give you an example of a little guy that, does this and, like World of Twilight. I don't know how many of you remember that might have watched my video on that like a while ago, but I have these miniatures. They're kind of a fictional world, and they look like reptilian, all different kinds of reptilian races, and they're like a fictional world, almost very cartoonish, but very beautiful, interesting fantasy world with actually a pretty cool rule system. It's one of
is that the one with the Neanderthal?
No, that's Savage Core. But this one, they're like kind of the dinosaurish looking, like reptilian looking characters, and they're really nice miniatures. It's very small company, like it's really one original creator, and I think he may have somebody that helps him with the sculpting, but I think he did the original sculpting, something like that. But he does all the rules himself, he does all the illustration himself, he creates a huge miniature line. Now, there's nothing stopping you from buying their rulebook and just playing with checkers, or whatever you want, like just to simulate it. But that doesn't really, I think, jive with tabletop gaming. But at the end of the day, I mean, I would fully expect that if you're going to go to a World of Twilight gaming day, you're going to be using their miniatures. I mean, I would feel embarrassed to walk into a game like that and not use their miniatures, like, and show up. I don't have a problem with that. Like, I really don't. I don't have a problem with somebody creating something kind of unique and hoping that you're going to buy the miniatures they make to play the game. Because I don't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, I actually also think that it's great to have games that you can use multiple miniatures for. Like I like both. Like I like being lured into somebody's creativity of their rule system and their games and their miniature line. I like that. And then I also like playing Musket and Tomahawks and being able to pick whatever I want out.
Yeah, just like Dan said, it's like many rule sets seem to be designed to sell for a particular company's miniatures, which exactly, if you're selling miniatures, you're basically gone in as a company and you want people to buy your stuff. And they design their rules, like Games Workshop always seems to, it's like, oh, we got a new edition, we put out a new codex or whatever it may be. And these are our newest miniatures, and the newest miniatures always seem to be the OP ones. So if it's OP, what do people do? They flock to buy the new stuff.
Yeah.
And their whole system is designed to sell the plastic crack.
Yeah.
Okay. They're drug pushers, plain and simple. I understand it. I understand the model of their how they sell stuff. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's like Burls and Badgers example of what you're describing. It's one of those things where you have a company, even if it's a small boutique company, they have a nice little rule set. They have a nice little line of miniatures that go with it. And if you enjoy the game, you're going to want to buy the miniatures that go with it.
I totally agree.
Nature
and I would agree, Burros and Badgers too. Like that's one of those games where I have the rule book and I haven't quite gotten into it yet, but I got it kind of interested in for that reason, is that beautiful miniatures, really cool looking rule set, wonderful creativity put in there, and, you know, why not support them? You know, I mean, there are some other anthropomorphic animal miniature lines you could use, but I don't think they probably fit Burros and Badgers as well as the miniature line created for it and the way they've sized the animals and stuff. Because in some cases, like in Burros and Badgers, I'm kind of going on, this is probably relevant for the discussion, but I'm going off on a tangent here. But Burros and Badgers has different sized animals in it. And so you actually do want to have small animals, like birds that are small, like they're like birds and small, like, and then you want to have badgers that are really big and kind of dangerous in that game. Yeah. Whereas some of the other anthropomorphized lines have birds as big as badgers. Like they're actually like human, like they're birds that are just not proportionately sized. Like they're as big as the other creature.
Scaled up.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well because you want to have them as different sized animals, like, because that's inherent to the rules.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a blue jay facing off against a badger. You know, they're not the same size, type of thing. Or a goldfinch going against a badger, or let's say a brown bear versus a badger. You know, it's like the scale is going to get bigger.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Now, one system that we played some, you know, the Frostgrave. Is that it's a system where they do sell their own miniatures, but I have so many different fanatical type miniatures, I really didn't need to buy their line. It's like, I'm just going to spend a small amount of money, use the rules, and go with it. Because I'm not playing tournaments. I'm not playing in, you know, around their people all the time that sell the stuff. So what's the big deal? Type of deal.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's pretty much our entire group's that way. We just use whatever we have and enjoy the game the way it is.
It's a perfect marketing piece to that. I mean, in the sense of like that's one of the reasons why people like Frostgrave is that it has a great rule system, as I hear, and then also you can use your minis that you have already, and so it's excellent.
Yeah, your drag. It's like, you know, when I designed Mel and I designed our, you know, we had our games rule books that we put out, all the ones that we had. It's like we designed it so you can use any. We basically said if you have miniatures, use them. We don't have any miniatures at the time. We wrote the rules. We started getting into making our own, you know, putting out our own miniature rules or miniatures, and then it's like eventually that was the whole the plan was eventually you're going to have your own miniature lines that people would buy that would play your game systems. But in the beginning, it's really simple. It's like, we'll just get your name out there, get the rules out there, and let people use what they have. Or point them towards a direction. It's like, you don't have these miniatures. These are the companies that sell stuff that will work good with our rules, type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's Skarnir said something similar to with a comment you have up now, similar to what you were saying earlier. Just, you know, he doesn't have a problem with people, you know, growing in companies that are growing and wanting you to buy their miniatures. It's just the problem is when gaming companies who use rule sets to shaft players out of more coin. And that's kind of, you know, similar in the sense of, I at least interpret that comment to be also like basically the way you change the rules to minimize or maximize a miniature or, you know, overpower something or even flat out just like Sisters of Battle. Like I realize they're back now, but for so many years people couldn't use them, right? Like you thought they were done. People sold off their Sisters of Battle because they didn't think they'd be able to use them again.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, you know, Games Workshop is one of those things. Their whole, like I said, there many times is that their whole model is that we come out with a new system every 2-3 years, and then we totally flip the table. What was good is now mediocre or average, and we bring out new lines of stuff that are OP that you need to have, and everybody has to flock. It's like, if I'm gonna compete in this system, I got to get all the new stuff. So they force feed you to fork out more coin, basically, and get all the stuff that, like, man, I don't want to have to buy more stuff. And it's like I already got $2,000, $3,000 wrapped up in my plastic crack already, and you want me to buy more so I can be competitive? Oh, it's like I've put the demarcation line, and we haven't gone past 7th, and we're stuck there. You know, we're stuck in amber.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Some games, it's far and fewer between where games respect the how do I word it? But they sort of respect the tradition of the game and the way it's evolved, and they put out miniatures that where they're not overpowered. Like not every new miniature is overpowered, where they'll actually release miniatures that have a utility but might not be as good as like the one that was released at a certain point earlier. And they just try to keep a balance going. I think it's really hard to do that and to run the marketing piece, but that's a whole nother topic in some ways, isn't it, Rusty?
It is.
Which games do a good job at their releases in keeping the earlier models still really efficient and also making the newer models attractive but not overpowered? I think actually there's a real skill to that. I mean, like that's very hard to do that in a business cycle, like and to maintain everything, you know, and keep that going. I do think some games do it though.
Yeah, there's you know, like one of the companies that like Clark and I or Skarner really enjoy. They have a good balance system going on when it comes to putting out their bipedal walking stuff.
I think we need to just call this like BattleTech drinking chat.
All right, I admit it. I am a BattleTech fanboy. I cannot deny who I am. But you know, it's like if somebody does something good, I will acknowledge it. If somebody's doing something bad, I will acknowledge it. I'm just like, you know, there have been times I've been a really good 40K fanboy and I've really enjoyed it. It's like we'll play it all the time, and I'm really let people know my really distaste for it. So
I think what we could do is when we, as our channel, like as this show evolves, we just need to make our actual screens that people are seeing in there, those little windows, really just the viewports of the pilots of the mechs. So like you could have a mech on the screen, just the TV inside where the viewport is, because it would be very fitting, you know.
Yeah. It's like you're looking out of the cockpit, you know, you see the bars going across and from the cockpit, and it's like you hear the cockpit sounds in the background going in the fire. That'd be cool. That'd be my 3D mock-up, you know, for my video game. That one, it's like that would be that.
Yeah,
definitely. Even though I love it's like the Mech Warrior Online game, where you actually get in the cockpit and you go out and fight with, you know, you're in your battle mech and you're fighting. I love that game, but I can't play it because the whole system is just like paint by numbers type of thing. Looks like we picked up somebody else because we're now up to 8. We got some lurkers in there someplace. So.
Excellent. That's awesome.
Yes, Skarner. I totally agree. We need our banner. What I need to do is like we got a House Davian banner upstairs. I need to bring it down here and then plant it. It's like type of thing. Put it in the background.
Yeah, you know, I don't think I would venture at even wanting to say out loud which systems I think that I'm referring to that do a good job at that, because every system's going to fail at it. You know, I think every system's going to release something that's viewed as being overpowered, or is going to have a miniature from the past that's not considered good enough anymore. But some systems still have like good miniatures from the past and new ones that come out that aren't the greatest. I'll give you an example though. When the Mechanicum were released for the Skitarii, people hated those Electro priests for the rules. Now that I love them in the lore, and I kind of like the models. Like I love the whole idea.
The lore has nothing to do with how they do on the tabletop.
Right. But you know, the funny thing is that the thing we hate is the thing we love is the thing we hate. Like, so you release a miniature and it's not the most competitive one out there, and people say, you know, why would I buy this? But then like, I thought you asked us to keep it kind of balanced, you know. Like we're not releasing Electric Police to try to beat everything else out there. Like we're just releasing them. This is what we think they should do. And so it's interesting. Like it's hard to please everyone, right?
Yeah, which kind of reminds me, it's like I don't have any Electro, so I got that. You know, you seen my big Mechanicum army. It's like sitting where I'm sitting here, I don't get any leg room, so it's like
that's what you need. You need electro priests.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of units I still don't have when it comes to Games Workshop for the mechanic. Now they got a new transport tank coming out. They got the flyer, which we spent all that one night chatting about. It's like, oh my God. It's like when I first seen it, it's like, what the heck is that thing? Oh my God. So that's one of those things where it's like, it's a love-hate relationship. I love the miniatures, but I hate the system, how they piggyback on it. So, and I love painting the darn things. I'm the first to admit it. It's like they get my money in one way because they put stuff out. It's like, I have to paint that. It's like, I need that in my army, even though I'm not playing it at the time. So I fall under the lurker collector type when it comes to Games Workshop right now.
And I think that's fair. You know, at the end of the day, I think getting excited about buying something and putting it together and painting it, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you spend a few hours on a miniature that you really like and you paint it up and it sits on your shelf and you don't really use it to game a lot, for some people see that as a failure, like as a waste of money. I would say it's whatever you want it to be. I mean, like if you just like to paint it and like you enjoy it, then you got your money's worth. You know, I mean,
it's your hobby.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like there's a certain amount of value in the gaming, and then there's a certain amount of value in just being able to do this stuff.
Yeah, it's like Clark made a good statement here. It's hard to talk about other systems, but I only have BattleTech. And there's others that you want to get into, but you want people to play with before you can start investing in them. And that's the hard. We talked about that before. One of the hardest things is getting a group, and then if you do have a group, is trying to get them to play games that you really want to play. Mm-hmm. It's like over the years, it's like I had systems where it's like, oh man, I really like that. It's like that mechanics look good, the miniatures look good. It's like, who would not want to play this? And then you buy into it, you bring it, show it to the group, and then it's kind of like, and it doesn't even register as something they want to do. And it's like, okay, it's like Malifaux was one.
Yeah.
Drop Zone Commander's another one. What's another one? It's that the football game, that the fantasy football game that we played for a while.
Not Blood Bowl or Guild Ball?
Guild Ball. Yeah, Guild Ball. Yeah.
Well, I sold my Malifaux, my troop.
Yeah, I made good money off my Malifaux stuff that they were nice painting, and it's like I put them up there for good money, and people bought them. So it's like,
yeah.
So I don't feel bad. I came out ahead on some of those. Now other ones, I'm still fighting. You know, like I said, I'm trying to get rid of my Drop Zone Commander because half of the armies I had that were painted up really nice and everything that I had done, people's like, oh, scarfed them up, made a lot of money. And I just still have the last couple ones I had, the ones I didn't put together and paint. Nobody wants to buy them because they're not painted. So it's kind of like a dead system, I think, now, because I think it died off.
Right.
I don't even think it's for sale anymore. So that might be part of the problem. I do have right up there. I do have a Blood Bowl Skaven team that I need to finish painting. That was I had somebody that we were played a few games, and he just was like, "Oh, I no longer want to play this anymore." And he sold his arm. He traded in to buy some different miniatures and stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, I got this team now.
It's a story that's as old as time.
Yes, and I was like, well, okay. So I turned around, and it's like I had the dwarf team, and I had the Skaven team, and I sold the dwarf team and made all my money back about fivefold, you know, after I sold them, because it was a nice looking team that I painted up. So people snarfed it up for good funny. But hey, that's part of the problem with our hobby. It's like running into things. You better bring me on when you're doing a BattleTech chat. It's like, our topic that we were just talking about, we might discuss, might be a good BattleTech topic.
I think that'll be the week that Palmer's on his sabbatical.
Yeah. Yeah, here's a good it's like I even noticed a codex creep in the new Bolt action releases and that is a historical game. Sort of historical game. It's, you know, still done by the guys that made were with 40K, so they have their roots in that. But I'll say one thing. I just ordered up because I showed a couple weeks ago. Was that 3 weeks ago? I had the Bolt Action Korea book on one of the streams. I showed it up.
That. Yep.
And I just ordered some North Korean troops because I already have the Bolt Action American troops because it's just late war Americans. If you got late war British or Americans, you can play those because they're the same equipment. All right. So I ordered up some North Korean, so now I have some. I could even use some of my Russians for that matter, facsimiles.
Yeah.
But I ordered, spent about $60 and bought 4 boxes of stuff, and I'll be winging its way because somebody obviously ordered some stuff and didn't want it anymore, and they put it up on eBay for free price. And I was like, what the heck? I just sold some stuff, so I'm gonna buy some more stuff.
There you go. All right. Well, I think we've kind of handled that one pretty well. I think how many more comments do we have here on that?
Let's see. It's like Clark had hosting a BattleTech chat would be really cool. We can do that sometime. I build armies that I never play, but that does not diminish my enjoyment in one, because that's part of the hobby. Is we like painting stuff, or otherwise we wouldn't do it. And we do. It's like you have, especially when it comes to your Marvel stuff. It's like a dead system right now for the one, and then the other ones come out, and you're thinking about getting into sometime. Maybe just to paint the miniatures, for that matter.
I'd likely play the game, but I won't. If all I end up doing is painting the miniatures, I'll be fine because I love Marvel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same way. I don't know if I'll ever play a 40K game again when it comes to 8th edition, because it's kind of leaving me behind because we're already talking about 9th edition. But
yeah, I
like the Mechanicum stuff, so I might every once in a while slip something in and buy it and paint it.
Exactly.
So for sure, I really enjoy assembly and painting it. That's the thing. That's what part of it. That's called a hobby. That's what we really love doing. And when it comes to having lots of miniatures, you get your interest in miniatures. I'm looking forward to Leviathans. What's the Leviathans? Leviathans. What is that, Clark? I'm not sure what that is. You have to let us know. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you have a whole bunch of historical miniatures, you can cross over to different systems, check things out. And it also sci-fi miniatures, you can use them until you get your hands on the real stuff. And I think that's the whole purpose that when it comes to playing these games, we have plenty of miniatures to drop them in. Now, when it's BattleTech, I have used my BattleTech miniatures crossed over into other systems. That is Dirt Side is one system where I've used my BattleTech miniatures in, because they have their walkers and stuff in it. And they were designed, that whole system was designed to have crossover with other game systems. And what's that? Same guys that do Cold War something. It's the they got a World War II system, they got a modern system, and they got the sci-fi system. They have the ability to cross over stuff too with their miniatures. Okay, it's alternative history. Here we go.
Oh, there you go.
History. Okay.
Cool.
In the 1900s, everyone developed anti-gravity systems, so battleships took. Oh, that one. Okay, yeah, that was the Catalyst, right? Was that the Catalyst game system? That
I've never heard of it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so if it's the Catalyst one, I think yeah, it is. It's the Catalyst one. I seen it. I played some of it at Gen Con. I was like, I totally forgot about that game. Yeah, it's like you go to Gen Con, they have a whole section now that is dedicated towards it. And it's like, it's kind of like if you play Dystopian Wars, if anybody ever played Dystopian Wars has seen anything about it, they have flying ships and battleships, like stuff like that. And it's kind of like their version of it. And it has some strange mechanics that go with it. It's kind of interesting.
Cool.
And it kind of gives me the feel, playing kind of like the same type of dice mechanic with the Star Wars game system, the
X-Wing
Armada.
And things like that? Yeah, Armada. Okay.
Yeah, kind of like Armada.
Cool. Well, yeah, no. So, I mean, seems like we were all across the board. Like a lot of things, there's just so much opportunity to play so many games out there, and some of them are really conducive to using different miniatures. Some of them, they don't make it so much to be conducive, but maybe it's not always a bad thing, in some cases, if you're supporting the game. So really, I think we're kind of all across the board. I don't think there's a right and wrong on this.
No. It's like anything with any one point in time, what you have will work. It's what you got. If you're at a point in your life where you can't really spend a lot of money, proxy stuff in. If your buddies have no problem with it, use it proxy until you can step in with something else with the right stuff. I don't have any problem with that. Yeah, it's like then when you get into playing at some like I said, if you go to Games World with 40 Warhammer World or whatever it is, unfortunately you're stuck with what you have to do.
That's right.
Otherwise, what you do within the confines of your own friendly game shop or local friend's house or whatever, sky's the limits. That's all I say.
I think it's one of those situations where it is what it is.
Yes. All right. Should we call it the night for it there?
I think so. I think we've actually done our topics. We've had a little bit of a late start. I appreciate everybody hanging in with us and joining us. We've had a nice group this evening. Thanks for everybody's comments as usual.
Okay, in 2 weeks will be the 20th. Is that correct?
It's the 19th or the 20th. I think we'll have to talk about
19th.
Yeah, I think we'll have to talk about. We're gonna have to talk offline just about our next one, just to figure out the holiday kind of stuff, because I'm going to North Carolina, so I'll be traveling for the holidays. So I'll have to talk about our next stream and announce it.
Yeah, because if we do the next one, it might be the 19th.
Yeah.
Tentatively, right now, and that will be on your side of the.
That's right. Cool. Cool.
So,
well, thanks everybody.
All right, everybody. So we'll let you know. We'll be putting out videos or something, letting people know exactly what the heck's happening, or it might be after the new year. So who knows?
Clark says he's going to be in North Carolina too. I'm going to be in Asheville, Western North Carolina, over from Canada. So
yeah, that's going to be a heck of a trip for you.
Yeah, I have family out that way, so I always go down there, and I used to live there too. And I used to live in Apex, just outside of Raleigh. I know all those places. And so it's like that song. Do they have that song in the US? I've been everywhere, man. You know that song?
Yeah.
It's big up here.
I've been to North Carolina, but my time was mostly at South Carolina, marching around at Fort Jackson.
There you go. Yep. Cool. Well, thanks everybody.
All right, we'll talk to you all later. You guys have a good night, and we'll see you all on your all channels, and we'll chat with you all later. That should